But one of the things I've learned on our journey too was that when we talk about education, it seems that we talk about education from a system lens. And it seems that we talk about education through numbers and through data, which is interesting and it's cool. But what I've learned about working with all of you is that it's a human work.
Yeah, well, our mission is to work with public schools. So we celebrate excellence in public schools, but we also cultivate equity in public schools. And that's ensuring that every student, regardless of where they live, what their background is, has access to the same opportunities and resources. Those human relationships between a teacher and a student are key to that student's success. Teaching is a human-centered profession.
Welcome back to the Future of the Human Experience. I am so excited to have a friend, a colleague also in the education space, Kim Graham, the CEO of the Arizona Education Foundation. Thank you so much for being on this podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So Kim, we had an opportunity to meet probably now over 2 years ago.
Yes.
Right? So real quick, my story of how we connected was I had the opportunity to serve on the board of AEF, which is what we call it. So I'm wearing the shirt very proudly today. And it's been a journey to not only be with all of y'all, but I've been learning so much. So that's what gets me so excited for you to be here with us today. But one of the things I've learned on our journey too was that when we talk about education, it seems that we talk about education from a system lenses. We say the education system or this particular spaces or these districts or what have you. And it seems that we talk about education through numbers and through data, which is interesting and it's cool. But what I've learned about working with all of you and not only teachers and educators, but administrators and folks that are serving this space is that it's a human work. And I've always gained inspiration from that. Tell us a little bit more about not only what AEF does, but what's the human side of the work that you get to do in AEF?
Yeah, well, our mission is to work with public schools. So we celebrate excellence in public schools, whether that's through different award or recognition programs like Arizona Teacher of the Year or the A+ School of Excellence program. But we also cultivate equity in public schools. And that's ensuring that every student, regardless of where they live, what their background is, has access to the same opportunities and resources. So it's a really interesting question because we think of public education, we think of school systems and just sort of, the logical way that should theoretically, work. But we know that teaching is a human-centered profession. There's this really great video called Jobs of the Future. And it looks at which professions over the next 10 years are going to be fully automated and performed by robots. And it's surprising some of the things that are being predicted, like the law profession, being a lawyer, being a bus driver, being an assembly worker, a doctor, an anesthesiologist. I mean, imagine being put to sleep by an anesthesiologist. I'm not sure about that. But teaching is not on the list. And it's because those human relationships between a teacher and a student are key to that student's success. And that's research proven. There's hundreds of studies that have been done about the effectiveness of those positive relationships between teacher and student. It not only helps students perform stronger academically, but it helps students remain engaged in education. They want to come to school because they feel like somebody cares about them at school. It reduces absenteeism, it improves graduation rates, and they also see the social emotional benefits because students want to set goals for themselves. They want to look at their lives beyond just school and plan for their future. So it's those types of human-centered relationships that no sort of technology, regardless of how advanced it is, will be able to replicate. So it's pretty cool when you think about it.
Wow. And Kim, but with that said, y'all have not shied away about engaging or at least understanding the role technology gets to play in our classrooms or in our experiences. Tell us a little bit more about how AEF has leaned into bringing technology experiences to educators and to communities.
Well, we were just named. We have a new education training center,
Wow.
and we can train 50 teachers or principals in person. And then we have remote technology that will allow us to train an unlimited number statewide. And because of that, we were able to work with Cox Charities, and our Educator Training Center has been named the first Cox Innovation Lab in the nation for teachers, and most of them are for students. So what that has allowed us to do is to bring in a lot of virtual reality, augmented reality technology. We have an entire lab where teachers can come and get trained on that, on 3D printing, on robotics, microelectronics. So definitely, technology is not something that we want schools to shy away from. In fact, we're working to try to help schools and teachers adapt to how quickly technology is evolving. And what we see in public schools is by the time they adopt technology, it's typically already advanced and everybody else is on to the next thing.
Yeah. No, it reminds me, I remember when I was living in Ecuador, we always have this conversation about the role technology gets to play in our communities. And I remember vividly having this conversation with other classmates or professors and saying, well, in the United States, they have this, because you would just know culturally like what's going on in other places. And then the response was always like, Eric, in 2 years, we're going to have the exact same thing. And I was like, that's great. But then you would see just in time, 2 years feels very different today than it did just in the 1990s, right? I mean, when we first met, AI was still kind of like something that was starting, and now it's something that's culturally relevant. You see, not only presidential campaigns about it, but companies talking about it. It's like been the word for the last 2 years. And it's so great that not only to see AEF leading into it, but what I love about the work that y'all are doing is that y'all have recognized the best way you're able to serve the students is you serve the educators. You serve those folks that are right in front of those students every single day. And even though it's wonderful to think that in 2024, going into 25, you have this recognition as the first one in the nation, but you also have to reflect back and like, wow, how long have we not had one for teachers, right? When we've been talking about innovation. So it's great to see that AEF is leading the way and being a role model for others to follow as well. With that said, Kim, your passion for this space is also something I've learned over the last few years. Tell us a little bit more about your journey into the education space. I know we have some intersections too in the past too, but share with us a little bit more about what brought you into being so passionate to advocate for this important work that's happening.
Well, my dad was a teacher. He taught math. And so I was raised in a teacher household. And anybody that's grown up with a teacher in the family knows that the whole house revolves around their schedule. Mm-hmm. So I think my mom said at one point she felt like we had eaten more dinners in a school gymnasium than we had at home, in our own kitchen. So I wanted to be a teacher like my dad. I saw how much he loved it, but I went into it knowing the full reality that it's not, an 8 to 5 job. You're working at night, grading papers, you're going to school activities on the weekends and in the evenings. So I spent the first few years of my professional journey teaching high school, and I was able to teach in the same school as my dad, even on the same hallway. He taught in one corner classroom, he taught senior high math, and I taught in the opposite corner classroom teaching 10th grade world literature. And we had the same lunch period. So it was a really awesome opportunity to be able to have, that professional experience with my dad as teachers. And from there, I moved into working in nonprofit education and primarily working in a rural area around arts education and making sure that students in rural schools had access to the arts. And, we talk about a digital divide. It's, that exists as well as a divide in the arts. And most of the time you only see arts education opportunities provided to students in more affluent areas. And it's the same thing with technology. We're seeing those schools, private schools or schools in more affluent areas, be able to adapt and adopt technology quicker than rural schools or schools in certain zip codes where there isn't a lot of extra money. And so just knowing that, it's always fueled my passion to work in nonprofit where I feel like I can make some kind of difference. And, keeping connected to that education world is important to me as well.
So Kim, I love the story of your dad, but also one of the things that I learned joining AEF was that you also have this wonderful campaign as that of everyone's story starts with a teacher or includes a teacher. Tell me a little bit more about the inspiration behind that. But it seems that for you, it was a very personal relationship that you had. Tell us a little bit more about why not only you're so passionate about this, but why it's so important for us to reflect about our stories and the teachers that made a big difference in our lives.
Working in Arizona, you would have to be living under a rock to not have heard about the teacher retention issue. And, there are a lot of factors that are causing teachers to leave the profession. And what we're seeing is not only are they leaving, but students are hearing that. And it's impacting their professional career choices. And what they're getting from this public messaging is, oh, don't go into teaching. Everybody wants out of teaching. And so we're trying to emphasize for students just the importance that teachers have on everyone's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So the Everyone Story Includes a Teacher campaign sort of puts people in that frame of mind to reflect back on who was that teacher that said those kind words to you or made you realize you're a great writer or you're a wonderful athlete or wow, you can really draw. What was it that a teacher may have said to you that really was the catalyst to you choosing the career that you chose or you becoming the type of person that you are?
Yeah, for me, and I was very fortunate to share my story at the Teacher of the Year 2023, where I shared the story of Licenciado Villegas for me. And as I started reflecting on my personal story is that he had this passion for making math so precise. Like he saw the beauty of the precision of mathematics. And that just inspired me that eventually when I started engineering school, I was just not only so curious, but I remember just being so excited about exploring those little edges and finding that precision of what you could build. And I remember just thinking about him and how he made me feel when he was trying to not only teach us math, but find the beauty in discovering these either mathematical models or what have you. And I remember when y'all asked me to share a story of my teacher, I was like, oh my God, I never had a chance to thank him. And I was so grateful that y'all gave me the opportunity, but y'all have given the opportunity to hundreds of people to share that story and reflect. So I highly encourage you, if you're watching this, please share the story of your teacher or reach out to them if you still have opportunity to do so and just thank them as well. With that said, Kim, share with us a little bit more about the public education conversation. I think today we're entering these areas that there's conversations about public education, private schools, like you had just highlighted, a combination of both of them with charter schools. Share with us a little bit more about what have been kind of your key insights into these spaces and what should we know more about public education that maybe most of us don't know today?
I think one myth around public education is that it only impacts a small subset of the population. And people don't realize that the majority of students in this country go to a public school. And public schools aren't the option for students who can't afford private school. And I think that's a very negative way of looking at it. Well, I can't afford private school, so I just get stuck with public school. And in public schools, magic happens every day. I mean, students are not just learning academics, but they're learning, hopefully, civil discourse. They're learning how to navigate life and relationships, interpersonal skills, and they're learning workforce skills. Those soft skills like teamwork and collaboration that help people thrive once they're in the workforce. And a lot of schools are, teaching technology and integrating AI and trying to help students be prepared for the future. So when AEF was founded, one of the tenets that our founder, Carolyn Warner, who at the time was the superintendent of public instruction, drew upon was the great Horace Mann's words that public education is the great equalizer. And it was meant to be the education for the masses so that every student had a chance at a high quality education. And so we're trying to, through AEF, help people realize that.
So Kim, Carolyn Warner had this vision 42 years ago about shining this important light into public education. Where have you seen this conversation change over the last 42 years as we're looking at public education through these lenses?
I think one of the big challenges that public education faces is having the needed resources and funding to be competitive with private schools. A private school can charge tuition, and a lot of times parents of private school students pay for those additional things, where public school families can't necessarily afford that. And public schools are taxpayer funded. So we have to make sure that those tax dollars are being invested in public education in a way that supports both teaching and learning. And that means ensuring that teachers have professional development and training to be able to support their students. We know that if teachers aren't comfortable with technology, they're not going to be early adopters of whatever is coming down the line. And we already know students are typically always about 2 steps ahead of the adults in their lives. So we already see students using AI in the classroom. So now it's, how do we get teachers trained and comfortable with AI? And not just in using it, but to me, the biggest challenge facing public education and the rise of AI is the ethical use of that, and how we saw AI emerge onto the scene as sort of the wild, wild west of what could happen with information. And now we're starting to see different people control it or attempt to control it. And that impacts how students access it and what they're learning from it. So being able to support teachers in that way.
Yeah, Kim, I love the point you're bringing up about us looking at our public education as someone that's serving our neighbors, someone that's serving everyone in our community. I remember vividly trying to look for a school for my son when he was coming of age, and I remember us driving past 2 schools and just saying, that school's okay, but it's not good enough. And I remember finding that 3rd school, and then we enroll him there. And I remember thinking, as soon as we did that, I stepped out with my wife and I told her, I was like, I think we just made a big mistake. Not about the school, but about how we just treated the other 2 schools that we just passed by. Because our son is going to turn 18 years old at the exact same time of those incoming students that are going into those other 2 schools that didn't have another option, probably didn't have the resources to drive by those other schools. And I remember just reflecting at that point, I was like, we need to care about the students that he's growing up with just as much as we care about him. And it just so happens several years later, we connect on AEF, and y'all helped me fulfill part of that mission as well. And for that, I'm very grateful, because I also need to learn a ton. I think all of us, when we get to serve in these areas, we're also coming in the spirit of learning. And I'm grateful for you and the staff that's always been willing, and also enough impatient, sometimes enough with the board to fill us up with some of the questions that we might have. With that said too, Kim, one of the things that we've learned a lot too is about how you guys navigate grants. That is one of the spaces that, again, being part of a board of a nonprofit, how you'll navigate grants every month, it seems like every week. I feel like every other day you have an update for us on this. Tell us a little bit more about how do you or the organization navigate some of this, but also what are some of like those through lines with other nonprofits too? Because it seems that is how these nonprofits somewhat stay serving the community, is basically not hoping, but to a certain extent planning to have the grace and donations of another organization that sees them to be able to contribute to that mission and vision that y'all have. Tell us a little bit more about that experience that you've had, but also what should we know more about as you're navigating some of these grants moving forward?
It's a really interesting point, because a lot of people don't realize how nonprofits receive their funding. And constantly having to write grants and raise money is just part of the fabric of being in a nonprofit. And it's not a guaranteed source of income. So every year it changes, and we're at the mercy of a lot of funders who change their giving priorities. So, for example, during COVID, understandably, we saw a lot of businesses shift from funding public education to only funding needs like, vaccine care or education, funding food insecurity, which, all of that was needed. But for those of us that typically relied on some of that income, it really, caused us to struggle. And I think what a lot of funders don't realize is the amount of time it takes a nonprofit to research a grant opportunity and then the application process itself. So if you're a nonprofit and you're applying for a grant for $100,000, you're expecting that application process to be really intense. I mean, that's a huge investment that you're asking somebody to make. But sometimes the application for a $100,000 grant is at the same intensity level as an application for a $1,500 grant. And it would be nice if funders understood, what is it that you actually need to know for this amount of investment, and taking into consideration just the amount of time and effort it takes a nonprofit to do that. And we definitely look at it in that way. If we're seeking funding from an organization or an individual, we want you to be a partner in our work. We want you to see it as an investment, that you're helping us make some sort of change. So our hope is that whoever is out there creating the funding mechanism thinks about the flip side of that, and how much time is it taking, for this nonprofit to fulfill this process.
Yeah, and if you're listening today, representing your company, representing different organizations, I highly encourage you, just get a little bit more educated on how your organizations are serving your community, navigate this. I agree with you 100%, Kim. That's been a huge aha moment for me, as well as I'm sure several other board members, on not only how we could get educated on your process, but how can we be better advocates within our communities that we're able to connect this efforts with. And so even though AF is here in Arizona and serving one of the fastest growing areas in the country, we know there's organizations all over the country, all over the world, that have a very similar mission and vision of what the impact education can have in their communities. And so helping them navigate that is just as important. Well, Kim, as we're wrapping up, I want to go back to that innovation lab that you were just talking to us a little bit more about. One, it sounds amazingly exciting, but also I'm sure you're seeing either parents today or teachers or different organizations listening to this too. How could they get engaged with that work that y'all are leading today?
They can find us at azedfoundation.org. Reach out. They can email me directly. My email's there on the staff page. And I'm more than happy to get them connected with our upcoming calendar of classes and workshops that they can engage in.
Oh, love it. The space is beautiful. I had a chance to be there at the opening. Jonathan was one of the leaders that was helping us there. And I think we bombarded him probably with 20 questions in a matter of 2 minutes, but he had answers for everything, which was great. I mean, you could just see that space come alive with teachers, principals, administrators. It's just going to be so exciting to see the inspiration that you're all going to lead, not only for us here in Arizona, but more importantly, that example you're going to be for other organizations around the country.
Well, thank you. We're excited and very grateful for all the partners that help make it happen.
Wonderful. With that said, Kim, one of the fun things we love to do with all our guests is we ask for a blind question that they might have for me today coming in. We've known each other for the last couple of years, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what question you might have for me today.
So I'm curious, because your whole work is around the human-centered nature of AI. Your children right now are in elementary school. What is one of your biggest fears or hesitations about their educational journey by the time they reach high school, and just all the technology that's happening?
Yeah, no, I love that question. I would say one of the most biggest challenges that I want to help my children navigate or any child navigate, just in the spirit of what we're just sharing earlier, is I want to help them be comfortable with asking questions. I think today because we're so close to just answering something either on our watch or on our phone, or we say the magic words, hey, something, we have an immediate answer there. And which is really cool and it's fun, but I also think we need to teach them, say, hey, how do you navigate some of those questions? How do you push the Siris of the world, the Googles of the world, to those edges and just explore some of those ideas a little bit more. I truly do feel that children have that ability actually way better than adults do, right? Because they're so creative. And so what I want to do is I want to make sure they maintain that creativity or find ways of unlocking it, right? Using this technology. It's like asking those questions. What is the 5 whys? And if Google answers this, well, why is that? And then ask it again and ask it a different way, and see how those ideas get explored. That's where I want to make sure our kids just stay with that spirit of asking, because I think that's not only going to help them in high school, but I think that's going to help them just overall in life. And I think at the end of the day, when we talk about our teacher stories or we talk about the impact public education has in our lives, it's all about just helping us be better human beings. There's this really good book that the head of HR of Intel one time recommended it to me. He says, everything I learned in kindergarten. I don't think you've heard about that, right? So he talks about kindness, respecting others, understanding how to navigate certain cultural differences. All those things that we learn as a little child. And so making sure as we're navigating our education, our schools, our communities, we still have that enthusiasm, right, to learn. And I'm extremely grateful that my teachers left that with me. And I want to make sure we also have that for our children, but also the children around them too. We just had my son's birthday not too long ago, and when I see friends that I haven't seen in a while, I see them, they say, hi, Mr. Eric, or they say, Coach Eric, because I have some different type of relationships with them. And the first question I asked them, I said, how's school? And they said, school's going good. I said, what book are you reading? And they kind of get a little bit shaken, like, wait, what just happened? Like, why, why are you? But I find it fascinating because I get to hear a little bit more about what they're interested in, right? Or ask them about what experiments they're doing or something. And I'm just trying to make sure I'm just keeping that curiosity, right, with them, because someone did that for me when I was little and just made sure I was always curious. And so I want to make sure our children in this digital era, they still stay just as curious, even though all those answers could be at your fingertips, but there's still a ton of questions that they could be asking. Does that help? Okay. That's a long answer.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, thanks, Kim. With that said, Kim, as we wrap up, what are you looking forward to this new year that's coming for not only you, but for AEF?
Well, we think our Cox Innovation Lab will just really enhance what we're able to do in terms of teacher training, the virtual technology we have being able to be a resource to rural teachers. Our staff has grown from a staff of 1. I was in 2018. Now we're a staff of 10.
Yes.
So we're dividing up this semester and then the fall semester, and we're trying to reach every single county in the state, stopping in to visit superintendents, principals, to make sure they know that AEF is a resource for them, no matter where they are. So, and it's really important for us to have that face time, especially in those rural districts, because a lot of times they're left out of things. So
yeah, I remember that was one actually the first conversations we had when I joined the board was how are y'all navigating this? And I love that not only you were recognizing that as an opportunity, but y'all were measuring how successful you guys can be, or how successful could the organization be in addressing that, and realizing that there's always opportunities to grow and serve more. And not only that shows your leadership, but it also shows that staff that the team brings in. And that would also be a huge aha moment for me working with all of you has been, as nonprofits, we're there to serve our communities. We're there to be very intentional with it, but we're also there to be very intentional with how we navigate those changes that are in front of those challenges too. And so that makes me very exciting also for 25. With that said, Kim, what is one of the books that you have given the most that has helped not only you navigate some of these spaces, but helped others that you want to bring along in this space?
Well, working in a nonprofit, one of the books that has been the most eye-opening for me is Uncharitable. Yeah. And as a board, you guys read it too with the staff. And that was really an interesting process because we were able to come together as a staff and a board around this big idea that nonprofits should not be treated differently than their corporate counterparts. And that's the whole premise of Uncharitable, is that we hold nonprofits to a different set of standards and accountability and transparency that the corporate sector doesn't have to adhere to. And it was really eye-opening, some of the stories that came out about, the information that nonprofits are supposed to share about the number of people that they're serving and how they're using every single dollar, what staff is being paid. And, the CEOs of major companies don't have to reveal their salary, but a nonprofit leader does. And it was just really fascinating. So what was your take on the book?
Yeah, I would say very similar. I think one of the biggest aha moments was that if I were to give $1,000 to this organization versus $1,000 to the private sector, exactly what you're saying about the grants. If I'm going to give this donation to a nonprofit, it probably comes with like, these are my expectations of how you're going to utilize this funding. And then I give it to the private sector and I'll be like, good luck.
Right.
Like, I'll see you in a few years. And so, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but to a certain extent, there's some truth in that. And so I think that was one of the things too. And then I think also the concept of the word nonprofit. I think that was the other thing too he starts the book with, right? He talks about how because we utilize that word, it also creates this little switch as well. It's like, okay, this is how we're gonna need to operate because profit is not good. And I think one of the things I've been learning also on this journey on the human part has been, no, profit is good. Profit is a reflection of how you're serving other human beings. And sometimes if we put that in the bucket of a nonprofit, you're kind of just making every dollar counts. I can't get not even $1 above because that's a no-no. And that's not really true, right? And so I think that's where, that helped me understand this a little bit more, especially knowing that AEF is growing.
Right.
Growing not only the staff, but growing the impact as well. But more importantly, I would say the exercise that you encourage all of us to do with all of you was just as important. So I think if you're listening to this, you're serving a board or you lead an organization, take time with your board. We spent, it was 2 days, right? In a matter of maybe 4 weeks. For us just to come together and just say, hey, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what we learned and let's talk about what does this mean to AEF and how we want to move forward. And I think that exercise was just as useful as sometimes just coming together in a retreat or in a day we get to spend with each other. Spend time to learn with each other too. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, it was interesting because nonprofits are to the corporate sector what a traditional district public school is to pre-K through 12th grade education. So AEF sort of operates as the underdog in both of those arenas.
Very good example. Well, Kim, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm so excited for what's coming for this organization, the example that all of you are leading for not only the state, but all over the country. We're going to share all the information in the notes for this episode so they can stay connected with the work. And again, just want to thank you for elevating the human experience and elevating the experience of our students all around the state.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Hey everyone, this is Eric, the host of the Future Human Experience. The reason why this podcast was created was to be a platform for others to really bring these conversations to life. So if you're enjoying this content, please like and subscribe. It will really help our channel and expose these ideas for others. Thank you.